Hello, my name is David Fechter. My wife Lana and I built and own Shalom Wildlife Zoo. Shalom Wildlife Zoo is located in West Bend, Wisconsin. We are also known as Wisconsin's wildest zoo because our animals live in large areas, natural habitat. It is often said that we have the happiest animals at the zoos. We are also known as Wisconsin's largest petting zoo because the 4 miles of trails allows you to feed animals along the way. So today I want to talk a little bit about Shalom and how it became a zoo. But before we can learn about today, we need to learn about the past, because the past brought us to today. Now, thousands of years ago, this area known as Shalom Wildlife Zoo, and an area just south of Shalom, was home to the Native American, and they were the Menominee Indians. Menominee Indians were the first tribe to live in this area, and the way we know they lived here is they left artifacts for us. And the kinds of artifacts that they left behind were effigy mounds, and carvings in stones, and directional trees to point which way to go. Lizard Mounds County Park is located 1 mile south of Shalom, and there you can see over 30 different mounds. There's a huge mound there in the shape of a lizard, and that is how the park got its name. But at the Shalom, we also have some effigy mounds as well. And on some of our mounds, you'll see a large stone carved in the shape of a buffalo. Buffalo in Wisconsin, you think? That's correct. Thousands of years ago, after the glacier left, the grasses started to grow. Bison came to Wisconsin, and the Menominee followed the bison for their food and their shelter and their clothing. We also have an effigy mound with a stone on it, and on the surface of the stone, there is a snake that is carved. Now, back in those old days, those Indian days, Native American people all had an animal's name. Ever heard of Crazy Horse or Sitting Bull? How about Red Cloud or Black Elk? But in addition to having a name from an animal, they also had an animal totem, and it was an animal that you were most like. And if you had a snake as your animal totem, it meant you were the holy man, the medicine man, the shaman. And so at Shalom, you can find a burial site with a stone with a snake carved in it. Well, Native American people lived here for thousands of years, but in the early 1800s, the U.S. government decided to homestead much of Wisconsin, and a family by the name of Hamilton purchased the area that we have at Shalom Zoo. The Hamiltons were farm people. They cleared the land, and they raised all sorts of crops and livestock. It was said that the land that is currently Shalom was the most fertile land around, and you could raise twice as many bushels of food on the same acreage. Well, the Hamiltons got older, and they looked to sell. Then in 1924, a wealthy immigrant from Germany, Arthur Ene, purchased the land. Now, Mr. Ene, he was an industrialist. He owned Pendleton Steel in Milwaukee, and this area that we call Shalom Wildlife Zoo was his getaway. He built it, along with many of the residents from the town of Farmington. See, shortly after Mr. Ene had bought the land, we hit the Great Depression. People were looking for work. Now, Mr. Ene was quite wealthy because during the war, he sold lots of items to the U.S. government. So he was able to employ most of the farmers. The lake that you see out here at Shalom is called Ene Lake. The lake still keeps his name, and it was built by man and horse. Imagine, this lake was dug with hands and shovels and horses. It is the largest human-made type of dam in Washington County. Now, the Enes, this was their place, their getaway. It was beautiful. It was said that it was the most beautiful property in Washington County. The town of Farmington fathers, they were so proud to have Mr. Ene here that they decided to pave the road where Shalom Wildlife is at. Except it wasn't called Shalom Drive in those days. It was called Ene Drive, and it was the first paved road in the town of Farmington. Well, everything went well for several years, but all of a sudden the town of Farmington decided it was time to tax Mr. Ene for this wealthy piece of property he had. Well, Mr. Ene came to the town and he said, "Why are you taxing me? I'm supporting all of you people." Well, the town stuck to their guns. It is said that they purchased the industrial park in the town of Farmington from the money they made from him for taxes. Well, Mr. Eni didn't care for what was happening, and he decided that he was going to show them. And so what Mr. Eni did is he sold the entire estate, 115 acres, to the Roman Catholic Church. Then it became non-profit, and there was no taxes. Well, the deal that Mr. Eni made out with the Roman Catholic Church was they would pay him $10,000 down, and in 10 years another $10,000. Well, everything went along fine, and this piece of property actually was a retreat for young girls who wanted to become nuns. Well, when the second payment was due, an issue happened within the church. What had happened was an attorney for the Roman Catholic Church had this idea. In Washington, D.C., by the Capitol, it was very poor. All of the property around the Capitol, people were very poor. So the church purchased all of this land. He thought that if someday Americans found out how poor it was, they wouldn't stand for it and they'd want the government to buy the land, and then the church would get rich. Well, the attorney, he was right, but he was about 40 years too soon. What had happened was the investment didn't turn out. Now today, the land around the Capitol is the most expensive real estate in America. But at that time, it didn't work out for them, and the church almost went bankrupt. So they had to start selling all of these little retreats that they had owned, including the property here at Shalom. Now, how did the road get to be called Shalom Wildlife? Well, after Mr. Eni had sold it to the church and it became non-profit, the town fathers said, hey, we're not going to call that road out there Eni Drive anymore. We need to change the name of it. And so they came to the Roman Catholic Church. They said, we'd like you to name the road. Well, the nuns who lived here, they said, it's so peaceful. Why don't we call the road Shalom Drive? And Shalom is a Hebrew word that means peace. And since that day, this entire property and road has always been called Shalom. Well, after the church lost the property, it was put on the market for sale. Two people, Leonard and June Fleming from Milwaukee, decided that this would be their retreat. The Flemings own a drywall company called Fleming Drywall. If you've ever gone down to the stadium, all the drywall in the stadium came from the Flemings company. They were the largest drywall company in the state, and they did very well. Well, when the Flemings purchased it, my wife Lan and I were about 12 years old, and we were the neighbor kids that lived out here. The land that you see at Shalom Wildlife was our playground. We would explore the forests and the grass and the fields and the streams. We loved nature, is what we did. Well, the Flemings decided to give us a job. Lana was a housekeeper. She swept the floors, vacuumed, ironed, washed walls, did dishes, and I was the caretaker. I would cut the grass and do the flower beds, rake up leaves, and we worked there for several years. But after about 24 years, the Flemings decided that they no longer wanted this property. They were getting old and elderly. They were looking for somebody who could keep the tract intact, and so they sold it to a doctor out of Milwaukee. Now the doctor and his wife moved out here, and after a couple of short winters, they realized this wasn't for them. See, back in those days, winters were heavy, and we had a lot of snow. It wasn't uncommon for Shalom Drive not to be plowed for a week or two. Well, the doctor's wife said, I'm out of here, I'm going back to the city. And so they decided that they loved the money more than the land, so they decided to subdivide it. Now, we heard that the property was going to be subdivided. We couldn't imagine the area that was our playground would be destroyed. So we talked to the doctor and asked him if he could sell us some land. And the first piece of land we purchased was 30 acres. Well, it was expensive back in those days, considering we were only 19 years old. But we worked 7 days a week, and we saved our money, and we paid off the land. And we saved up some more money. And then one day, we decided, let's build our house. A house that we could live in with our two children, Joy and Buckley. Well, we went to the town fathers, and we said we want to build a house on our property. And after they looked at it, they said, you can't build there. We said, why not? They said, well, when you were sold the land, you weren't given a right-of-way. You have no access other than to go there, but you can never build. Well, we were totally shocked that we couldn't build on our property. So we talked to the doctor and we said, hey, would you mind selling us some more land? He said, not yet, maybe someday. If there's a chance, I'll get you a right-of-way. Well, luckily for us, in 1981, we had a real bad recession, and times were right to buy land at that point. And so we were able at that point to purchase 40 acres of the pine forest and 11 acres along the lake. Now we had a place that we could build our house. We had access to Shalom Drive. Well, the first thing we did was we needed to put in a driveway. And at the driveway entrance, we put in field stones. And one Saturday afternoon, while we were working up there, a young man pulled up in his car. He said, hey, what do you got back there? We said, oh, there's some deer and Native American things, some mounds and what have you. He said, would you mind giving me a tractor ride through the forest? We said, sure, hop on. So he hopped on the back of our Ford 8N and we gave him a 2-hour tour. Seen a couple of deer, talked about the trees, the flowers, the Native American that lived here. And after 2 hours, we took him back to the road to get into his car to head home. And he reached into his pocket and he said, that was amazing. He gave us $1. I got a $1 bill for giving a 2-hour ride. I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. People love to learn about nature. Well, the next Saturday rolled in and 4 people showed up. And when they showed up, he said, hey, would you mind giving us a ride like you gave that young lad last week? So we gave those people a ride. 2 rides, 2 on the drawboard times 2. That day we made $4. Well, the next weekend, 8 people came, then 30 people. Pretty soon, so many people were coming, we were doing tractor rides all day long. So we went over to Newburgh, and there's an implement dealer called Luckins. And in their used equipment lot, there was an old, junky, broken down manure spreader. It was an ideal manure spreader. Well, we bought it for $800, and we pulled it home. We took the beaters out of it, took the chains out of it, and threw in some straw bales. Now we could haul 18 people at one time. I could make $18 every 2 hours. Well, word got out that we were doing tractor rides and people started to come. Pretty soon we were doing rides 2 hours, every 2 hours, on Saturday and Sunday. Well, then one day the phone rang, and here Jack Esselman, the owner of the Newburgh State Bank, called. He said, hey, Fector, I understand you're doing wagon rides over there. He goes, I'd like to bring my board of directors to go on your tour, except there's 40 of us, and we're not going to sit in a manure spreader. He said, if you're going to do wagon rides and make a business out of this, you ought to go get yourself a decent trailer. I said, well, when would you like to ride? He said, next week, Wednesday. Well, we went to Kewaskum, and there was a trailer manufacturer named Best Trailer. We talked to the owners and said, we need a trailer that can hold 40 adults. It needs to be handicap accessible, and we need it by Wednesday. This was on a Friday. Well, they said they'll see what we can do, but Wednesday morning showed up, and sure enough, the trailer was ready, and we started doing wagon rides. Now we could haul 40 people at one time, and the word kept spreading, and pretty soon we were doing rides from 8 in the morning to 12 o'clock at night. That's right, we put lights on the trailers so we go at night. And in those days, we only had white-tailed deer. And people would come from all over the state of Wisconsin to see those gigantic white-tailed bucks. And we called it the rut ride. Tons of people would come and learn how deer habitat, how to make it work for them. We would test scents and lures. It was a great thing. So then we decided, well, why don't we get some bison? Add an animal to the farm here. Then we got some fox and bobcats, and every year we added more and more and more people started to come. And pretty soon, we were doing tours 7 days a week. Well, my daughter Joy had an idea. She said, why don't we do a wagon ride in the Christmas time? Feed the deer with Santa, where we could drive through and look at the decorations we put out and see the wildlife. That also was very popular. And we were to go again from 8 in the morning to 12 o'clock at night. Well, it was just Lan and I, with our children helping us, and we started to get pretty burned out. Well, we decided one day we need to change things in order for us just to survive. In addition to the general public coming, we were doing schools, tons of schools, from a 90-mile radius. But then one day a lady pulled into the driveway, and she was from the Department of Ag. She said, "Are you guys doing wagon rides here?" We said, "Yes, we are." She said, "Do you charge an admission?" We said, "Yes, we charge $2. She said, "Well, if you are showing animals and you're charging for it, you have to become a federally licensed zoo, which means you're going to have to be inspected, and you're going to have to follow all kinds of criteria for animal health." And she goes, "Before I leave today, I'm going to have to inspect your farm, and hopefully we don't find anything that you receive a citation." Well, it was unannounced, and we were surprised, but we've always tried to treat our animals with the most respect. And so we decided to go through the tour, take her on a tour through the zoo. And when we got done, 2 hours later, she said, "Beautiful. It's a wonderful zoo, and you have no citations." And that is when we became a federally licensed zoo. And every year we add more animals. We have lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. We have lemurs and camels and zebras. We actually have over 750 animals, and we have 75 species. And every year we do try to add something new. So that is how we got to become a zoo. It took many years. I'd like to thank God Almighty above for giving us the strength, the wisdom, and the leadership to keep this thing going. I'd also like to thank our children, Joy and Buckley, and our son-in-law, Scott, and my grandchildren, Kale and Sage, because it takes a whole family. We've added some zookeepers and employees. We put in a restaurant. And I'd also like to thank all of our visitors. We've had wonderful support for volunteers. People donate money and they donate food for the animals. If it wasn't for the visitors, there would be no Shalom Wildlife. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Come and see us soon. And if you've been here, come back again sometime. Thank you and have a wonderful day.